Well, hey, with that being said, we are in week number 5 of our series on marriage, which is based on the book, The Meaning of Marriage by Timothy Keller, who I regret to say actually passed away this Friday. He was dealing with a 3-year battle of pancreatic cancer, and so Dr. Timothy Keller passed away this Friday, and so please, if you think of his family, be praying for them, and certainly his legacy will continue on. He's been a big influence on me, as well as I know many other pastors. Has really been compared to a modern-day C.S. Lewis, and so a big loss for the Christian community, but he's home with Jesus now, and we get to continue to remember him through this series and teaching on marriage. And you guys must have felt really bad for me because last week we had 6 books here. No one had taken a book, and by the end of the day, they're all gone. And so, very thankful that you guys took those books. I did get a couple more in case you want them. And they are on display in our new resource center, I guess you could call it, aka the bookshelf. That's back there. Those are resources that you're free to take, read, borrow, whatever. And those books are available over there as well. But in any case, we've talked about a number of things in this series so far, but I want to bring you back to something we talked about in the first week of this series. And it was not without controversy. It was kind of a controversial statement, and that is that you never marry the right person. Like, you can try super hard to search the world and to find that guy or to find that girl who completes you. And sure, at first, you might find someone, but before long in your marriage, something horrifying is going to happen. You're going to find out that Mr. Perfect or Mrs. Perfect isn't so perfect after all. In fact, they begin to change. You begin to see something different in them. Sometimes they change to the point of being unrecognizable from who they were on your wedding day. You know, people assume that if they find the right person to be their spouse, he or she will make them happy. But as Stanley Hauerwas, professor of ethics at Duke University, puts it, this moral assumption overlooks a crucial aspect to marriage. It fails to appreciate the fact that we always marry the wrong person. We never know whom we marry. We just think we do. Or even if we marry the right person, just give it a while, and he or she will change. For marriage, being the enormous thing that it is, means that we are not the same person after we have entered it. The primary problem is learning how to love and care for the stranger to whom you find yourself married. If you've ever been married before, you can probably relate to this in some way. Marriage changes people. Life changes people. And so what you have to do is try to figure out a way to live with and love this new person who you now find yourself sharing a home with, who you find yourself sharing a bed with, right? You wake up in the morning, it's like, I don't remember you. You're a new person. You're not who I married. But how do you do this? What are the practical tools that you can apply to your marriage to make this thing work? As we talked about last week, if your primary calling is to help your spouse become the person God wants them to be, how do you do this in a productive way? How do you love this stranger in such a way that both of you grow and mature and where you don't get caught up in endless, repetitive, and fruitless arguments? What does this look like? Well, to help us frame the answer, I want you to notice what the words of Paul in Ephesians 4:15. He says, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ. So how do we love the stranger? It's could be summarized in this way: by speaking the truth in love with the power of God's grace. As an institution established by God, marriage is powerful. There is something powerful about this union between man and woman. And within marriage, there are 3 specific ways in which this power can play out, which I think we as Christians especially need to know, we need to accept, and we need to use in marriage. And these powers are the power of truth, the power of love, and the power of grace. And we're going to spend the rest of our time unpacking these 3 things. So first, marriage holds the power of truth. Do you know or remember how back in the day, like medieval times, they used to have these like masquerade balls, parties, and how these parties would work out is that everyone would show up wearing a mask, sometimes a very elaborate mask. And for the first part of the party, you would keep that mask on. And so it was fun because you'd be eating with people, you'd be hanging out, having some drinks, talking to folks, and you wouldn't have any idea who you were talking to. You wouldn't know who the other person was. But when the clock strikes midnight, everyone would take off their mask. In that moment, all the masquerades would be lifted away, and your true self would be revealed for all to see. This is very much what marriage is like. It is the relationship where the clock strikes midnight, where all the masquerades are lifted away, where you stand the most unfiltered, where your true self is readily exposed. Why? Because marriage is intended to be the closest human relationship. Now, we can make arguments. You could try to make arguments about other relationships being closer, like a parent-child relationship. Like, that's pretty close. But even in that relationship, there's a power difference there. And so when a child criticizes the parent, it's pretty easy for the parent just to brush it aside as youthful ignorance. Or how many of you know when you were a teenager and your parents told you that you weren't dressing the right way, or they criticized you for not working hard enough in school, you could come up with a very rational reason why you were right and they were wrong, right? How many of you know that? There's a power difference in the the parent-child relationship. And besides, the expectation is that at one point, that child's going to grow up and leave the home. And so that relationship will change. So marriage is certainly closer than that, but it's also closer, I would argue, than a cohabitating relationship. And in that instance, sure, you have 2 adults living life together who see each other up close and personal, who see each other's bedhead, who smell each other's morning breath, right? You have that in a cohabitating relationship, but in that relationship, each person is still their own person. Their lives aren't merged with their partner like they are in marriage. They're still independent of each other, meaning that they could walk away from that relationship without much legal consequences at all. So if the other person's flaws are too much, you can leave. You don't have to deal with it. There's an easy back door. But this isn't the case in marriage. Marriage reveals your flaws to your spouse and vice versa, to the point that you simply cannot hide them. Not only that, but you can't escape their flaws either, at least not simply. And so you're forced to deal with each other's shortcomings. Your problems are her problems. His issues are your issues. And what are the kind of flaws that your spouse might see in you? Well, maybe you are a perfectionist who tends to be critical of yourself and others. Or you might be inflexible, having a hard time with change and getting easily upset when you don't have your way. You might be a super independent person who has a hard time making decisions with someone else, or who just doesn't like being told what to do by someone. You might be a fearful person who is often overcome with anxiety and irrational feelings. Or maybe you're just oblivious. You have a hard time reading the room or are insensitive to the feelings of others without even knowing it. Any one of these character flaws would be highlighted and would be revealed in marriage. And what you will find out is that marriage has a way of bringing out the best in you, but also bringing out the worst in you. Marriage has a way of revealing your character flaws and your issues that you have been blind to your entire life. Like before I got married, I would have said that I was a very patient person. I would have said that I don't get easily angered. I would have said that I have a decent level of self-control. I would not say that now, after 8 years of marriage, right? I've learned that I got issues, and marriage has helped reveal that to me. When it comes to marriage, I want you to think of a bridge. And specifically, think of an old bridge. Now, given the area in which we live, when you think of an old bridge, you probably think of Black Hawk Bridge out in Lansing. You know, when I first moved to Lansing, my dad and my in-laws, we all went out to Shep's for dinner. And we were in the very back room of Shep's, and we were looking out over the river, and we were just watching cars go across the Lansing Bridge. And in the course of the conversation, what we were talking about was just that we didn't understand how that bridge stays upright. Like, how does that bridge work? And as we watched cars go by, we would get nervous, especially when a big old semi-truck would come barreling through the Lansing Bridge. And when it would get right to the center, we'd wonder, how does that work? How is that thing standing with a huge semi-truck going across it? But obviously those concerns do have a little bit of merit to them, because some of you might remember how back in 2011, they had to close the bridge because of a crack in one of the floor beams. Like, there's a reason why they're replacing this bridge. But think of what happened in the case of a crack in the floor beam. To the naked eye, you probably weren't able to see that crack or notice it, but I bet when one of those semi-trucks would drive over it, the weight of the vehicle would open up the fracture so that it could be clearly seen. And so the truck didn't create that crack in the bridge. The truck just revealed it. You see, when you get married, your spouse now becomes that big old truck driving right across your heart. He or she applies the pressure that reveals your defects. Marriage didn't create your weaknesses. Marriage just reveals them. It's not your spouse's fault that you got issues. Your spouse is just revealing the issues you have. And though, like other people, like your parents or your friends, notice these traits within you and maybe even talked to you about them, marriage now forces you to reckon with them. It forces you to deal with your problems. In a very real sense, marriage brings out the worst in you. But believe it or not, this is a good thing. This is a great thing. You know, it's very much akin to going to the doctor, having an appointment, and being told that you have a mole on your skin that's precancerous. And so you have to get that thing removed. And no one in that instance goes, I wish I hadn't gone to the doctor. I wish that the doctor didn't notice that mole. I wish he would have missed it so I wouldn't have to go through all this trouble of getting it removed, making more appointments, and doing all this stuff. No one says that. Why? Because you know if you didn't see that mole, you'd have a lot more problems down the road, a lot bigger issues down the road with skin cancer. What marriage does is confront you with your deadly sin problems. It puts the mirror right in front of your face and forces you to look at the real, unfiltered, unflattering image of yourself. And again, this is good because with the help of your spouse, and most importantly, the Lord, you can begin to address those sins, those issues, and gradually become more and more like Christ, which is really who you were intended to be all along. Because the only sins, friends, that can truly enslave you are the sins that you are blind to. And so as Hebrews 3:13 says, we must encourage each other every day so that you won't become hardened by sin's deceitfulness. You need that trusted friend. You need, if you're married, your spouse who can come to you and confront you with your sin so that you aren't deceived or blind to it. Marriage holds the power of truth in your life. But it also holds another power, and that is the power of love. If Celine Dion is now stuck in your head, I'm sorry. The power of love. But there is great power in love, isn't there? Because here's the thing. No matter who you are, you have a self-image. You have a view of yourself which has, consciously or subconsciously, been stitched together by the thoughts and the opinions and the views of the people around you. Like if you had a dad who was critical of you, or if your coach praised you, or if your teacher said that you wouldn't amount to anything except for a ditch digger, or if kids picked on you because you were a nerd, or whatever it might be, how you see yourself, even today as an adult, is influenced by how other people saw you in your past, whether good or bad. But along comes your spouse, your beloved. And this person now holds an immense power. Marriage puts into your spouse's hand a massive power to reprogram your own self-appreciation, Keller says. He or she can overturn anything previously said about you, to a great degree redeeming the past. The love and the affirmation of your spouse has the power to heal you of many of the deepest wounds. Like if everyone growing up said you were ugly, but your spouse says you're beautiful, your husband says you're beautiful, you will feel beautiful. Or I personally experienced this in my own life with this insecurity that I've dealt with growing up with being socially awkward. I've shared this before, but I had those negative voices from people or even an ex-girlfriend who told me that I was socially awkward and that I should even reconsider being a pastor because it was such a problem. But in comes Laura, who loves me for who I am, who affirmed me that no, I wasn't awkward, who was maybe a little awkward herself, but who kind of helped me learn how to talk to people, right? She kind of came alongside me and showed me how to have these conversations with people. Her love and encouragement has now helped me heal this wound in my heart, where I can just laugh about being awkward and not feel bad about it. And my guess is that you've experienced this in some way as well. Whether it was your spouse or a best friend, kind words from someone who knows you intimately mean so much. If a stranger were to come up to you and give you a compliment, just someone off the street were to say to you, wow, you're the kindest person I know, you might feel flattered when they said that. But you would kind of be able to brush that comment aside because deep down in your heart you know they don't really know me, right? They don't really know who I am. How can they say that I'm the kindest person they know? But if your husband or if your wife or if your best friend tells you that you're the kindest person I know, you know that they know you, and so you know that they mean it. To quote the Lord of the Rings, the praise of the praiseworthy is above all rewards. There is great power in the love of the one who loves you the most, who you love the most. When it comes to communicating this love to our spouse, it's important that we give it to them in a way that they can receive. Because did you know that people receive love in different ways? Each of us is hardwired to receive or to have different love currencies or love languages. Christian family counselor Dr. Gary Chapman has brought this idea out in his famous book, The 5 Love Languages. And Chapman argues that there are 5 primary ways in which people communicate love. And though all are important for every single person, some people care about other expressions more than others. And you might already know them, maybe you've heard this before, but I want to go through them now. And as I do, I want you to be thinking of 2 things. I want you to be thinking of which love language do you resonate with the most? But even more importantly, which love language do you think your spouse resonates with the most if you're married? How does he or how does she receive love and affirmation? And you can think of other people, like a friend or kids, but for our purposes, we're going to use marriage as the example. And so love language number 1 is words of affirmation. Mark Twain is known for saying, "I can live for 2 months off of a good compliment." Do you find the same to be true for you? If someone speaks highly of your spouse, does it energize him or does it motivate her? Do the encouraging words of a loved one go a long way? If it has been a while since your spouse has said anything nice to you, does it drain you and cause you to question how they feel? Is your wife or husband the kind of person who needs to hear the words, "I love you," often in order to feel secure in the relationship? You know, I've heard it said that there was once a wife and a husband who were kind of in counseling, and the wife was saying that she felt pretty insecure in their relationship because she never really heard from her husband kind words. And specifically, she said to her husband, "You never really tell me that you love me." To which the husband responded, "I told you on our wedding day. I'll let you know if anything changes. Of course I love you." Like for a lot of people, verbal expressions of love mean more than even words could say. As Solomon writes in Proverbs 12:25, "Worry weighs a person down, an encouraging word cheers a person up." So words of affirmation is a love language, but a second love language is quality time. Do you spell love T-I-M-E? Do you fill your tank by walking with your spouse through the woods? Or going out to eat and having a conversation over dinner? Or just working on a puzzle together? Does your wife get bothered when you work long hours and don't come home until late at night or until after she's in bed? Or does it drive your husband up the wall if when you're talking to him, you are on your phone, or as he's talking to you, you're scrolling through Facebook and not making that eye contact? They might be someone who feels love through quality time. Or maybe your love language is receiving gifts. If your husband brings you home flowers on a special day, or even better, on a completely random day, it means the world to you. Or if she gives you a gift based on something you said off the cuff months ago, man, her thoughtfulness leaves you speechless. Or if a friend gives you the gift of time by coming to your brother's funeral, or writes you a kind thank you card after you gave them a gift, that's something you'll never forget. This is one area where Laura and I are a good team because neither of us are gift givers. We don't really feel love in this way. But we're also a really bad team because we'll be like on our way to a wedding, we'll be on our way to a party, and we'll be halfway there and go, we forgot a gift! We didn't think of a gift, right? Some people, though, find that super meaningful. Gifts are extra special for them. A fourth way people receive love is through acts of service. When your hubby does the dishes, you're walking on air. When your wife cooks you dinner, you couldn't be happier. You're in your happy place. Or if she gets up, or if he gets up in the middle of the night to soothe your crying baby, or if she cleans your truck for you as a surprise, it speaks love to you loud and clear. If this is you, you probably feel love through acts of service. And finally, the last love language is physical touch. Obviously, sexual intimacy is a huge part of this for a married couple, but a lot of the time it's a lot more subtle and simple than that. Maybe for you, a hug from a friend is the best form of comfort in a hard time. Or maybe a pat on the back from a good pal makes your day. Or the closest you feel to your spouse is just when the two of you cuddle on the couch. Or when he holds your hand during the prayer time at church. Yes, church can be a place where the love can sizzle between the two of you. Or to use an example from our marriage, I've had to learn how to give good back rubs. That has been key. And how to learn and to play in Laura's hair. That has been a huge part for us. If you want Laura to melt, start playing in her hair, right? Just pro tip for you. She'll melt into your arms. Simple yet meaningful forms of touch can really fill up a person's love tank. So what's your love language? And if you're married, more importantly, what's your spouse's love language? Are you communicating your love in a way he understands? Are you showing you care in a way that connects with her heart? You know, perhaps a lot of conflict in your marriage is just centered around this miscommunication with love. He's trying to show you love in one way, you're trying to show him love in a different way, and it's just not connecting. Maybe that could solve some issues. But before we move beyond this, you might be wondering, why does this really matter? Like, why is this something that, especially as Christians, we should care about? Communicating love languages. Well, we do this for our spouse because this is exactly what God did for us. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and full of truth. Through the humanity of Jesus, God's glory was revealed to us in a way we could relate to, right? In the Old Testament, Moses asked God to show me your glory, and God comes before him, and he only shows him his back, because he said, if you saw the full extent of my glory, you would die, right? And so what God did through Jesus is he made his glory knowable to us. He communicated his love for us in a way we could understand. The distance between us and God was bridged by his incarnation, making the love of God knowable to us in a profound way. In the same way, we should make every effort to demonstrate our love in ways that our spouse relates to, because there is great power in love. But on the flip side of this great power lies a great problem. If your spouse can be the ultimate source of love, they can also be the greatest source of hurt in your life. Your husband's opinion of you, if they're negative, can be a terrible weapon. Her hurtful words can cut you like a knife. And since your spouse is sinful, and since you are sinful, there are bound to be times when you both say and do things to hurt each other. Sometimes deeply, sometimes intentionally. The reason your spouse knows how sinful you are is because you often commit those sins against her or against him. As Keller says, and there's the great problem of marriage. The one person in the whole world who holds your heart in her hand, whose approval and affirmation you most long for and need, is the one who is hurt more deeply by your sins than anyone else on the planet. So what does this mean? It means that if you only tell the truth, if you only utilize the power of truth without showing love, your critical words will be destructive. But on the flip side, if you only show love but never confront with the truth, you rob your spouse of the enormous potential of spiritual growth that marriage provides. And the point is then that the truth and love need to be connected. They need to be expressed in tandem. You need to feel so loved by your partner that when they criticize you, you can receive it, you can admit it, and you can grow from it because you are secure in that relationship. We need to keep truth and love together. But this is way easier said than done. In fact, it's pretty much impossible. There needs to be a third element that binds those two together. And the solution, friends, is the power of grace. How do you love the person who has hurt you so deeply, yet who you find yourself committed to through covenant? But at the same time, how do you confront them with their sin in a healthy way? How do you talk to them about these issues? Grace. The experience and the recognition of the grace of Christ. Because if you have a genuine understanding of God's grace, you will be able to authentically practice two of the most important skills in marriage: forgiveness and repentance. Two crucial skills in marriage. In Mark 11:25, Jesus tells us that while you are praying, if you're in this time of praying with the Lord, it is important to determine whether or not you are holding any bitterness or grudges against someone else. And if you do, you are to forgive that person, just as God has forgiven you. But friends, you don't just forgive and forget. Because Jesus tells us in Matthew 18 that if a friend sins against you, go and tell him his fault. Confront him about the sin. Confront him about the hurt. Now hold on. Time out here for a second. Jesus is saying something radical here. Something that's pretty much the opposite of how we see things in our world. Because for most people, confrontation is actually a form of revenge. Like when you confront someone about how they've wronged you, you go and you tell them off. And you give them a piece of your mind, right? You get to look them in the face and say, you can't treat me like that. And because you hurt me, because you made me feel bad, I'm going to say some things that are going to tear you down. And see how that feels. And how many of you know that when you do that, it can feel good, right? It can feel good to give them a piece of your mind. There's this like dopamine rush that comes from it. It can feel good to tell them how it is, to put them in their place. And if you're bitter with someone, how many of you know that you just dream of the day that you will see that person again, and you fantasize about what you would say if you could see them and talk to them face to face, how you would give them a piece of your mind and put them down and tell them how you really feel. Oftentimes we see confrontation as a way of getting back at someone else. But this isn't a healthy way to handle conflict. And it certainly is not a healthy way to handle conflict with your spouse. And so Jesus' solution is that in order to prevent confrontation from being a form of revenge, the Christian needs to first forgive. To first start by forgiving that person in their heart and then go and confront him or her. The 3 steps are to forgive, to confront, and then, Lord willing, if it's possible, to reconcile with the other person. Forgive, confront, reconcile. And these are all essential in marriage. You need to be able to forgive your spouse before confronting them so you don't attack them in hot-headed anger. If you don't, your marriage will be all about truth and there won't be any love. But you need to confront them. You absolutely need to address your spouse with their faults. If you don't, your marriage will be a shallow relationship that has a love component but no truth because you're afraid to talk about the issues. Laura has a friend who has confided in her that her husband has done some things and has led their family in a certain way that she has deemed wrong, that she does not agree with, that hurt her, that she even thinks are sinful. But she's not willing to confront. All she says is, I'm going to pray for him to have a change of mind. I'm going to pray that he'll have a change of heart. She loves him. She respects him. But there's no truth there. You need to confront. Because thirdly, following the confrontation, both parties need to have the ability to admit fault and then be reconciled together. To repent to each other so that the relationship can be restored. Because in confrontation, it is absolutely imperative that the one confronting does so with humility. You must not criticize your husband or your wife from a state of superiority with a harshness devoid of understanding. And really, that brings us back to having an understanding of God's grace. It's based on the understanding that even though you were so messed up by sin and hopelessly lost in self-destructive behavior, Jesus not only demonstrated love to you in a way that you could understand, but he willingly died on the cross in your place to pay the penalty of your sin. And this was not based on your performance, but based solely on his grace, solely on the grace of Jesus. And what makes his grace so amazing is that there isn't a single person in the universe more hurt by your sin than Jesus. There's not a single person in the universe who is more wounded by our rebellion to his goodwill than God himself. Your sin hurts Jesus way more than your spouse's sins hurt you. And you might feel like at times your spouse is crucifying you, but your sin is actually what nailed Jesus to the cross. Yet despite all of this, he loved you. He forgave you and gave himself for you. And so the calling then is to follow his example. You are to love your spouse just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word. May you, in your marriage, speak the truth in love with the power of God's grace. Let's pray to end our time together in worship. God, we are so grateful. We're so thankful that you loved us despite of us, that you gave yourself for us, that you died in the place of the unworthy. God, help us, for those of us who are married, to love this stranger to who we find ourselves attached to. God, help us to show love in a way that is meaningful, that communicates love in a way that they can receive. And God, I pray the same for anyone here who's single, who's either thinking of marriage in the future or is content in singleness right now. God, help them to practice this form of love in their relationships. May they show this kind of love to their kids, to their friends. May they be selfless. May they love the people around them in a way that you would have them love. And God, we love you. And we lift this morning to you, and we declare in worship that no matter how fierce the battle is, the battle belongs to you. And so it's in your name that we do pray. Amen.